While Shedeur hasn't had too many reps with the first-team offense, owner Jimmy Haslam was asked about the narrative that he wanted the franchise to draft Shedeur.
The ongoing mess at quarterback in Cleveland has become its own tradition at this point, but this year, it feels different not because it's more chaotic, but because it's more telling. There's a new name in that jam-packed QB room, Shedeur Sanders, a fifth-round pick, not getting much run with the first-team offense, barely on the radar for some folks in power. And now, we know why. Jimmy Haslam, the owner of the Browns, decided to clear the air, or cloud it even more. He sat in front of the media and gave what he thought was a harmless clarification about Shedeur's selection. But what came out? A giant red flag. Haslam basically said, "Look, if you told me on Friday night we were taking Shedeur on Saturday, I would have said, not a chance." Then he backtracked, threw in that they had a meeting, said Andrew Berry made the decision, and wrapped it all up with some vague line about the right people being in the room. But that's not clarity, that's division, that's code. That's an executive wiping his hands clean of a choice that wasn't really his. You don't say, "That ain't happening," unless you had real doubts. And that's the entire issue. The tone, the timing, the phrasing, it all screams one thing. Shedeur Sanders wasn't a unified pick. He wasn't someone the organization rallied around. He was a compromise. Maybe even a reluctant one. This is more than just a press conference gaffe. This is the kind of internal fracture that young quarterbacks feel in their bones. If you're Shedeur and you're sitting in your dorm after a long practice, watching that clip, what runs through your mind? You're not thinking, "They believe in me." You're wondering if they ever did. How can you focus on development when the owner is out here acting like you're someone else's idea? It doesn't matter if Berry technically made the pick. If Haslam didn't stand by it, that sends a loud message to everyone in the building. Some players get a red carpet, others get a maze of office politics, and behind-the-scenes whispers. Shedeur's clearly dealing with the latter. Let's be real about what this means. It means the young man is already climbing a hill most don't have to. It means there are folks in that building who never wanted him there. And if you think that won't impact his reps, his opportunities, or the perception of him in meetings, you're not paying attention. This is the NFL. Draft politics are real. Coaching biases are real. Reputation, narrative, relationships, they matter. And what we just witnessed is a textbook example of how a young player gets undermined before he even throws a preseason pass. Some people are trying to spin it. "Oh, it's just a comment," they say. "No big deal." Wrong. In this league, perception is everything. Publicly suggesting you didn't see a pick coming that you didn't think it would happen is as good as planting a flag in the sand that says, "Don't blame me for this one." And why would Haslam want to make that distinction? That's where the deeper story begins. Because you can't talk about Shedeur without talking about Deion. That last name carries weight, it carries pride, and for some people, it carries resentment. There were whispers leading up to the draft, whispers that Shedeur was sliding not because of his arm, not because of his tape, but because of who his father is. Because Deion dared to be bold, because he was loud, because he challenged the establishment. And when draft day came, all those whispers turned into reality. Shedeur, once projected to go in the top 2 or 3 quarterbacks, suddenly found himself waiting and waiting until the 5th round. That wasn't coincidence, that was calculated. That was the league sending a message. They didn't need to conspire. It was understood. You don't reward Deion for shaking up the system. You push back, and the cleanest way to do that? Let his son drop. Make him feel it. It's the oldest play in the book. Hit the legacy to humble the loud. The heartbreak wasn't just professional, it was personal. You don't think Deion watched that unfold with pain? You don't think Shedeur felt that sting? Of course they did. And now, that same energy is following him into the league. So when Jimmy Haslam says what he says, it confirms everything. It's not just about one team, it's about a culture that doesn't like to be challenged. It's about punishing someone for daring to move differently. And here's the thing, Shedeur didn't ask for any of this. All he did was show up, do the work, and carry himself with class. Yet he's the one facing the uphill battle. He's the one who has to prove twice as much, earn twice as fast, just to be seen as equal. Now, of course, there are those who say, "Relax, draft round doesn't matter. Look at Brady, look at Montana." And yes, stories like that exist. But let's not pretend the path is the same. For every late round gem that makes it, there are hundreds who never get the shot, not because they lack the talent, but because they lacked the backing. Opportunity isn't just about talent, it's about timing, it's about trust. It's about whether someone in the building is willing to pound the table and say, That's our guy. And right now, it's not clear Shedeur has that. Not when the owner is publicly shrugging off the decision. Not when the reps in practice are being rationed. Reports say he's getting only a handful of throws per day. That's not a competition. That's a courtesy. His own father reportedly didn't want him attending training camp under those conditions. And can you blame him? How do you grow when you're barely given the ball? How do you showcase your skill when your name's not even being called? In the NFL, reps are currency, and right now, Shedeur's wallet looks light. Sure, he'll get some snaps in the preseason, but will it be enough? When you're not getting the full rhythm in practice, you're expected to turn it on under live fire. That's a setup. That's not development, that's survival. And here's where it gets even more brutal. If Shedeur doesn't shine in those limited preseason minutes, it won't be chalked up to a lack of reps. It'll be used as validation. See? Told you he wasn't ready. That's how the system protects itself. Without a champion in the building, lower round picks are disposable. They become insurance policies, afterthoughts, and too often they get filtered out not by ability but by silence. Someone has to stand up and say, this player deserves real investment. Someone has to go to those meetings and advocate when it's not popular. If that's not happening, if no one's in his corner, then Shedeur's already lost half the battle. This league isn't just about performance, it's about politics. And the people who pretend otherwise are either lying or lucky. Now, does that mean Shedeur can't break through? But it means the odds are being stacked in a way they shouldn't be. He's not just fighting for a job, he's fighting a narrative. One that was written before he even walked in the building. And for many, especially Black fans and athletes watching this unfold, it hits different. We've seen this story before. The double standard, the coded language, the quiet politics. We saw Eli Manning say he didn't want to go to San Diego, and he got what he wanted. No backlash, no punishment, just understanding. But when someone like Deion speaks out suddenly, it's an issue. Suddenly, his son becomes a lightning rod. That's what doesn't sit right. That's what people feel in their gut. And it's not about victimhood, it's about visibility, about calling out patterns that repeat themselves in plain sight. So yeah, the comments were foul. They were more than foul. They were a flashing sign of everything wrong with how this league handles difference. But here's the silver lining. Shedeur's got the chance to turn it all on its head. If he plays well, if he performs under pressure, he can't be denied. Not forever. Talent forces hands, even the ones that try to keep them folded. And the truth is, Cleveland needs a quarterback. Badly. This isn't a team that can afford to play politics forever. If Shedeur outshines the others, Flacco, Gabriel, Pickett, there comes a point where performance speaks louder than whispers. But until then, we've got to acknowledge what's happening. The hurdles are real, the energy is off. And if people care about fairness, they should care about this. Because no player, no matter their last name, deserves to walk into a job already shadowed by silent doubt. You walk into a room where the door was barely cracked open for you, and you're supposed to smile like you belong there, like the hesitation in the air isn't thick enough to choke on. That's the space Shedeur Sanders now occupies. He wasn't just picked late, he was picked with disclaimers, with qualifiers, with invisible ink that reads, "Not everyone here is on board." And that changes everything. Because when a franchise truly believes in you, you feel it. They tell the media how excited they are. The offensive coordinator starts drawing up packages with your name on it. The position coach calls your phone to talk through tape. There's energy, there's momentum. But when a pick comes with apologies and backtracking with phrases like, "That's Andrew Berry's call," what does that tell the locker room? What does it tell the coaching staff? It whispers uncertainty, and uncertainty, in this business, is poison. Veterans pick up on that. Coaches pick up on that. The media, the fans, everyone senses the tension. And suddenly, every incomplete pass becomes a debate. Every mistake gets magnified. Every rep feels like a test with no curve. Meanwhile, the quarterbacks drafted ahead of him, guys like Dillon Gabriel, walk around with built-in support. Not because they earned it, but because the suits upstairs already decided they're worth the investment. That's how narratives get locked in before the pads even come on. And Shedeur? He's supposed to prove himself under stricter conditions, with fewer chances and less room for error. That's not development. That's trial by fire with a wet matchbook. You can't underestimate how much that impacts a young player's confidence. The NFL isn't just physical, it's mental warfare. If you're walking into meetings wondering who's really in your corner, you're already at a disadvantage. And again, it's not just about talent. No one questions Shedeur's arm, his poise, his pedigree. This is a guy who went toe-to-toe with top-tier competition in college. He's shown command, decision-making, and leadership. He's been a starter, not a backup, a field general, not a placeholder. But all of that means nothing if the people around you are silently hoping you prove them wrong. just so they can say, "I told you so." This is why so many promising careers never get off the ground. It's not always about what happens between the lines. It's about what happens behind the scenes in meetings, in private conversations, in those small, quiet moments where decisions are made about who gets the next rep and who gets benched. And when an owner talks the way Haslam did, those small moments get colder for Shedeur, colder and less forgiving. It's ironic, isn't it? The team with arguably the most inconsistent quarterback history in the league has the audacity to act like they've earned the right to second-guess promise. They're starving at quarterback, yet they hesitate when something different walks through the door. Maybe because different scares them. Maybe because different threatens the old way. Maybe because Shedeur, through no fault of his own, brings a spotlight they didn't ask for, a mirror they didn't want to look into. But none of that should matter. Football is supposed to be about performance. You either move the chains or you don't. And yet, here we are, dissecting boardroom politics when the kid hasn't even played a preseason snap. And then there's the deeper cut, the one not everyone wants to talk about, the racial layer, the cultural discomfort, because we've seen this before. A young, confident black quarterback gets labeled too early, gets critiqued more harshly, gets fewer second chances. We watched it happen to Lamar Jackson, to Cam Newton, to Jameis Winston, and while every situation is different, the pattern is loud if you're paying attention. Shedeur Sanders walks in the door with more credentials than half the names ahead of him, and yet he's the one getting the cold shoulder. And yes, some of that is about day on, some of that is personal, but it's also systemic. It's about who gets to be embraced and who has to claw their way in. So when Chris Russo says, "Who cares what round he was drafted in," he's not wrong in theory, but in practice, it matters. It always has. Because in this league, where you're drafted shapes your path. It determines who invests in you, who waits for you to develop, and who cuts you the moment you stumble. It's easy to say, if he's good, he'll play. But anyone who's been around the league knows that's not always true. Plenty of good players get buried. Plenty of average players get elevated. It's not always about who throws the tightest spiral. It's about who has a seat at the decision-making table speaking on your behalf. And that's the million-dollar question for Shedeur right now. Who's speaking for him? Who in that building is willing to risk their reputation on his success? Because if that answer is unclear, then so is his path. This is the invisible weight that Shedeur now carries into every snap. Not just the expectation of a rookie, not just the challenge of adjusting to the pro game, but the need to overcome internal doubt, to win over skeptics, and to shift the energy in a room that wasn't exactly waiting with open arms. It's not impossible, but it's rare. It takes more than talent. It takes resilience, timing, and one or two people with real pull saying, "Give him the shot." And here's the part that burns. He never should have had to fight this hard. If you go back 6 months, he was being talked about as a day one pick. Analysts were debating if he could challenge Caleb Williams. His tape was clean, his stats were consistent. The only real knock, his last name. That's how fragile narratives are. A few whispers, a few front office opinions, and suddenly, you're sliding 100 picks below your projection. For what? For being Deion Sanders' son? For being confident? For having a camera crew during practice? The same things they celebrate in some players, they punish in others. That's the double standard. And now, in Cleveland, he's trying to build something with bricks soaked in that bias. He's trying to earn reps from coaches who might have preferred someone else. He's trying to win over a fan base that doesn't even know where the hesitation is coming from, only that it exists. He'll have to outperform expectations just to reach the level others are gifted. And if he fails, they'll say it proves the point. But if he succeeds, then what? Do those same voices give him credit? Or do they move the goalposts again? This is why the stakes feel heavier. Because it's not just about whether Shedeur can play. We know he can. It's about whether the system will allow him to prove it before it decides his fate. So for now, he waits. He waits for reps, for chances, for someone to say, "Let's find out." And when that chance comes, whenever it does, it'll mean more than a touchdown. It'll mean he cracked through. He won't just be proving himself as a quarterback. He'll be proving that belief matters, that no matter how the room looked when he entered, he had every right to walk in like he belonged. And if he does rise, it won't just be a victory for him, it'll be a warning shot to every team that doubted him, every scout that buried him, and every owner that sat in the car on draft night saying, "That ain't happening," because it did. He's here now, and the league better pay attention. The NFL is a league that claims to reward grit, but too often, it rewards narrative. And Shedeur Sanders is caught in one of the most dangerous types archetypes, a narrative not built on performance, but perception. Perception of his father, perception of his background, perception of how he carries himself. And if he doesn't play this perfectly, those perceptions could define him before he ever gets the real chance to define himself. There's a word that gets thrown around too casually in football circles: meritocracy. The idea that if you're good enough, you'll play. But anyone who's been close to this sport in locker rooms, in front offices, on practice fields, knows that isn't always true. Meritocracy in the NFL is selective. It's political. It's filtered through preference, comfort, and control. And when a player doesn't fit the mold, even slightly, that so-called meritocracy gets tighter, less forgiving, less flexible. That's what Shedeur is facing now. He's not just being judged on what he does, he's being judged on what he represents. That's a dangerous place to be for any rookie. What makes this situation worse is that Cleveland isn't even a franchise with a clear starter. This isn't Kansas City. This isn't Buffalo. The Browns have been searching for a franchise quarterback for decades, and still, even with that desperation, they hesitate when a quarterback with promise walks in. That speaks volumes, and it says even more when the hesitation isn't based on tape or character or performance. It's based on ego, on identity, on institutional pride. Haslam's comments weren't just careless, they were emblematic of how teams sometimes sabotage their own future to protect their past decisions, like giving Deshaun Watson $230 million guaranteed and then refusing to admit it's unraveling, like pretending that pick was sound when the evidence on the field screams otherwise. So when Haslam says, "Don't look at me, Andrew Berry made that pick," it's not just a deflection, it's fear. Fear of accountability, fear of owning yet another risky quarterback decision, and that fear is being projected onto Shedeur, a player who hasn't even been given a real opportunity to fail or to thrive. He deserves better than that. Every player does, especially one who's already carrying more than he should have to. But this is where the story flips, because sometimes pressure creates something sharper. Shedeur isn't naive. He knows the odds. He knows what they're saying behind closed doors, and he's seen it before in his father's career, in his own recruitment, in every level of this game. He was built for this, whether the league likes it or not. That's the part no one's talking about. While everyone's focused on where he was drafted, Shedeur's been focused on the field, on the film room, on every rep he can squeeze out of this opportunity, even when the odds are skewed. Because he understands that in this league, sometimes your breakout moment doesn't come when the coaches hand it to you. Sometimes you have to seize it when no one's looking, when the preseason lights are low, when you're lining up with the second unit, against the starters, when you only get 5 throws, and you make sure every single one counts. That's the pressure cooker he's in. And while it's unfair, it's also a chance to do something bigger than just win a job. It's a chance to change the temperature in the room. Because if Shedeur performs not just competently, but explosively, the politics melt away. The whispers go silent. The excuses dry up. Performance shuts people up in a way nothing else can. But even then, it'll take more than one big game. It'll take consistency, discipline, patience, and a mind that can shut out everything outside the huddle. That's the hardest part. Not the throws, not the playbook, the noise of being doubted, the noise of being seen as a symbol before being seen as a quarterback, the noise of an owner who publicly distanced himself before you took your first NFL snap. And still, Shedeur's gotta walk into that building like he owns it, not with arrogance, with purpose, with the knowledge that his presence alone already forced conversations NFL teams weren't ready to have. He's not just trying to win a roster spot, he's challenging an entire system of perception, one that punishes players like him for the confidence they're told to have but not allowed to show. And make no mistake, if Shedeur succeeds, the credit won't come easy. They'll say it was luck. They'll say it was timing. They'll say it was the system. They'll say anything but the truth that he was good enough from the start, and they just didn't want to see it. But by then, it won't matter, because he'll be on the field, and they'll be scrambling to rewrite their scouting reports. This is the game within the game. And for all the distractions, all the politics, all the quiet resistance, Shedeur still has the ball in his hands. And that's all he needs, because once he's out there, no meeting room whisper, no GM hesitation, no owner disclaimer can stop what happens next. He'll get hit. He'll get doubted again. He might even get benched. But if he keeps showing up, keeps throwing, keeps commanding that huddle with the same fire that made him a household name in college, there's nothing they can do. They'll have to give him the keys. Maybe not this season, maybe not in Cleveland, but somewhere, because eventually, talent forces its way through the cracks. And Shedeur, he's got more than talent. He's got a mission, and maybe, just maybe, that mission includes shaking this league out of its comfort zone. The clock's ticking, the preseason is coming, and when that whistle blows and Shedeur takes the field, every eye in the building, even the ones that pretended not to see him, will be watching. And that's when the real story begins.